The Dialed In Angling podcast presented by OnX Fish, Arneson's Rocky Point Resort, Strike Master, and 13 Fishing. Hey, welcome back to this week's podcast. It's hard to believe that it's August already. Summer is flying right by. I feel like I say that every single month. It seems like it's April, May, June, July, and then boom, fast forward right into August. You know, with the warmer water that we had in July, it looks like we're going to get a big break in August here. Temps are already been cooler at night. You can tell daytime is already getting shorter. You know, when I drive to work in the morning, it's not quite as light as it was even a couple of weeks ago. As we progress towards what I would consider fall, and that's into September, especially into October, you know, you see this transition period where, you know, these mid-lake humps, you know, are the weeds are up to the surface. A lot of these fish start to slide off into the edges of the basin. You know, there's lots of fishing opportunities in August. You know, I've talked about it before. I've talked about the doldrums, where to fish, where to find fish throughout the summer months. I'm still keying in on weed lines. The weed lines aren't quite dying off yet. As we get towards the end of August here in a few short weeks, especially as you get into that early September time period, you kind of hit the peak of the vegetation. When you start to see that vegetation die off, you start to see these fish push out of the weed lines and off to the edges. That's when you start getting into these fall patterns. And for some lakes, just because we've had a really warm, dry summer, the surface temperatures have been really warm. I know those weeds started peaking early. And so you can start to see some of that as we get into even early August here. I haven't seen it on too many lakes yet, but the other day when I was on Mille Lacs, I've been on Leech, I've been on a bunch of different bodies of water this week. You're starting to see some of that floating vegetation. Eelgrass is one example, but milfoil, even cabbage weeds where they're starting to break off and starting to die off just a little bit. I wouldn't say it's a complete die off yet, but as that vegetation starts to die off, those fish will start to push out to the edge. But as of right now, I'm still catching fish on tons of different weed lines. For walleyes, an example, if I'm looking for fish, I'm typically trying to find them in areas where, you know, they're in, let's say, a gap in between a weed bed, and trying to find those fish in that area or on a flat. You know, if you can find a flat that's adjacent to weed beds, you're going to find tons of walleyes. Also, smallmouth bass. I've been chasing smallmouth bass. You know, they seem to be kind of mixed in with the walleyes on certain rock piles and that sort of thing. If you can find rocks within the vegetation or just adjacent to the vegetation, that is key for this time of year. And, you know, we're kind of in that transition where, like I said, it's not quite fall yet, but as temperatures start to drop here, you will start to see some of these fish shift out into the basin areas. So it's that time period where you have to kind of check everywhere. You know, when I get out to spots, I go exactly where I fished the day before or last time I was on that body of water. But, you know, like being on Mille Lacs right now, you get out to that spot and those fish are completely gone. We've had different wind shifts every day. You know, we'll get winds out of the southwest, and when it warms up and when these cold fronts move in, you'll get a northwest wind, even a west wind, even a straight north wind. We've had all sorts of different winds this week alone. And so going out to those spots, checking the spots where you caught the fish, but then if they're not there, just quickly moving on and looking for more fish. Hey, we got a great podcast for you. You know, like I said, August is here. My guest this week is Mike Verdeja of Mike Verdeja Guide Service. He's been a good friend of mine for a long time. He's a fish head, just like all of us out there in the dialed in angling world. I wanted to get Mike on because he's doing a guide trip with me today and the next few days. I've known Mike for over 20 years. He's a really good stick. He runs a guide service on Mille Lacs Lake, but he fishes all over. He's guided in Alaska. He loves it in northern Minnesota. I want to get his take on how his summer's been going, how he's catching fish. He's a really good angler when it comes to catching a lot of different species and just a great mind and a great friend. So stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to have more from Dialed In Angling after this with Mike Verdeja's Guide Service. Arneson's Rocky Point Resort in northern Minnesota offers a little something for everyone. Nestled on Lake of the Woods' South Shore, it provides easy access to 14 remarkable reefs. Serious anglers know that Arneson's offers some of the best fishing, charter fishing, and small boat fishing options, all supported by the largest protected marina on the lake's South Shore. Accommodation selections range from 1 to 5 bedrooms. Equipped with all the modern conveniences, guests can enjoy a delightful dining experience and stunning lake views at the Rock Harbor Lodge, an on-site full-service bar and restaurant. The two beaches provide hours of fun for the whole family. Whether you're seeking an idyllic fishing spot or a relaxing vacation, Arneson's Rocky Point has everything you need. Check them out at arnesonsresort.com. All right, my guest is Mike Verdeja of Mike Verdeja's Guide Service. Mike and I have been friends for a very long time. We fished together. Mike has fished all over North America. I know he's guided in Alaska. He does a ton of trips on Mille Lacs Lake. He's a fish head like all of us. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, you know, when it comes to August fishing, I started out the podcast talking about August fishing and how you sort of get this transition in between what I would consider like midsummer fishing and fall, right? And finding fish in locations. Let's just go with your home waters and my home waters of Mille Lacs Lake. You know, on a lot of small lakes, I look for, you know, these tall standing stock cabbage. You know, I'm looking for vegetation. But, you know, sometimes in August, you start to get this vegetation die off and you start to get some of these fish that'll transition out into the basin, whether you're talking walleyes, largemouth bass, even smallmouth on lakes. But also you can get fish that are very weed oriented. I know on Mille Lacs, for example, I haven't been fishing a ton of weeds, but I've been fishing a lot of rocks still. You know, all summer long, I've been catching fish in the rocks. What I love about fishing rocks on Mille Lacs is the fact that you go out, you catch smallmouth, you catch walleyes, you catch everything in the rocks. I haven't left the rocks this year. I know you spent some time out on mud flats, some other locations. As far as August fishing locations on Mille Lacs, where is Mike Verdeja fishing right now?
Well, you know, with the resurgence of a lot more people coming up for walleyes, I've definitely had a lot more walleyes action this year personally, you know, which I've been really heavily smallmouth for the last 10 years. So this year, one of the better mud bites I've seen in a long time, because I go out there and check it every year. There's been a lot of years it's been hard to find groups of fish, hard to get the big fish to bite. So this year, especially over the last 3 weeks, I've been getting a lot of fish on the tops of mud. If I can't find them on the tops, they're not that active. You get them off the sides, you see them kind of schooling out. The basin hasn't been great for me, but if I can get them in the tops, and the tops are shallower tops, 21, 22, 23 feet, and I can see them, they're active. So I've really been chasing them around on the tops of even some of the deeper gravel, but the mud's been really good over the last little while. You know, and when it comes down to smallmouth, you talk about weeds. I've been really finding some more like sand to weed transition into finding schools off the edges. And it's been really good for me. Numbers have been the best, probably early August, late July numbers I've seen on smallmouth in years.
You know, I think the weeds get overlooked in general when it comes to smallmouth fishing on all sorts of different lakes. I've been on 3 different lakes this week, and every single lake that I was on, I caught my biggest smallmouth in the weeds. And I was on Leech Lake just the other day, and, you know, we're hunting down walleyes in the weeds on Leech. It got dead flat calm. Anytime it gets calm on Leech, I'm always seeking out vegetation. Get in there, I'm like, oh, there's a really nice fish. Throw on it, about a 20 and a half inch smallmouth. You know, same thing on Mille Lacs. I think as the vegetation kind of gets slimy and dirty and stuff, a lot of anglers leave those areas because it's tough to fish.
Yeah, it can be challenging. You know, we're doing a lot of really subtle things, trying to just keep on the outsides. Drop shotting outside of weed lines is really easy for customers to do, so I've been leaning on that pretty hard.
Yeah, the drop shot bite's been really good. I've just been swimming nets even, you know, like just like swimming a minnow, but just throwing a net out there and just working it, you know, subsurface, you know, not even scoping with the net, just like you said, with customers, just throwing it out and just either reel it in steady or just working it below the surface and catching a ton of fish. I know they had the classic bass tournament out of Hunters last week. There was 2 guys that really, really teed off on them. And I think both of them are either swimming minnows or swimming neds. It's still working for me. swim baits this year too. It seems like catching a ton of fish on little tiny paddle tails all year long, where it's normally, it seems like that paddle tail bite's good early and late, but then it sort of dies off midsummer. I don't know if it's because of the young of the year hatch that we're having or whatever, but those really small little paddle tails have been killer for me.
Yeah, I've finally been able to get them to start kind of moving and chasing those actually a little bit quicker, especially if I'm around the weeds. But I do believe those weed fish act differently because of the amount of minnow balls I'm seeing like on the edge of those and schooling outside them. And there's bait everywhere on this lake right now. I mean, let's be honest. But those fish are, I mean, I can see boiling bait balls. And if you can get them underneath those, they'll hammer them.
Mike, let's step away from Mille Lacs for a second. Just get to know you a little bit better. You and I have been friends for a very long time. Let's backtrack a little bit. How you got started guiding on Mille Lacs, first of all. Second of all, I know you spent some time up in Alaska. I want to hear about that because I absolutely love Alaska. Right now, I've got some friends up there, and I have some severe FOMO this time of year not being in Alaska because I'm seeing all the pictures of salmon. And I know you spent quite a few years up there guiding this time of year up in Alaska. Let's start with how you got your guide service started. I know you and I are friends. We spent some time together. We actually went down to Cabo together with Roger Cormier.
Yeah, it's probably 20 years ago.
Yeah. And it seems like yesterday, right?
Yeah.
But how you got your guide service started. I know you kind of leaped into it and, take me from there on to today.
So I got my start on Lake Mille Lacs. Honestly, I came up here after we met, fishing a couple times, was thinking about the dream, getting up north. What better place to go than Mille Lacs? It's a busy place, lots of business. So I started with McCoyd's Inn, an event center down on the south end of Lake Mille Lacs, working for Terry McCoyd. Great way to get my foot in the door. Terry knows a lot about the lake. He was a really good mentor, taught me smallmouth, muskie, walleye, as well as you and a bunch of other guys. But I stayed there for a while. I think I put 7 or 8 years in there, and he was selling the resort, and I thought that was a good time to make the leap into my own business, and literally just did that, took the leap and said, I'm just going to go on my own, and, got my boat and was able to, with a strong network in the industry, knowing people from the cities when I worked at Joe's Sporting Goods and then all the years at McCoyd's and just a big outdoor presence in Minnesota. I was able to stay busy through social media and just now I take, dang near every day of the open water season on Mille Lacs in the Alaska thing. So that first year when I went on my own, I was a little nervous going, okay, there's always that lull. Kids are going back to school. Early September, late August seems to be a harder time for people to stay full. I had an opportunity with a friend. He said, hey, if you're worried about that, I have an opportunity for you to come up and do some fly guiding for cohos or silvers on a remote river. It's a fly-in camp in Alaska. And I somehow convinced my wife that it was a good idea for me to go for 40 days. And we had 2 kids under 2 at the house, and I did it, and it is amazing. It's every day you wake up, you're bringing people down to a river and just having the most epic silver salmon run on a fly rod. People do use spinning rods, but it's crazy. And over the years, I've went off and on. I do a little bit of that, but with a family and everything else, and honestly building the business here stronger, it's just harder and harder to leave. So my seasons there have gotten shorter, and now I've missed a year or 2.
So when you take people out, were you in boats, like float down the river, or would you walk and wade down the river?
Yeah, we're on foot to some extent. So we have 4-wheelers, and we have these big carts. They're all, nice padded seat, rigs. We drag, 4 people down per guide. And, you bring all your gear, and it's probably a half an hour ride down to this little coast. And so you're going right down the ocean, but it's a river mouth right on the coast. It's only about a 3.5, 4 mile stretch of river, but hundreds of thousands of salmon run up the stretch of river through the season. So it's pretty awesome. And bears everywhere and all kinds of great wildlife. The mountains are in the back, and it's, yeah.
Did you have any dicey, close calls with bears at all, or were they pretty standoffish?
They're pretty standoffish. They're actually pretty mellow for the most part, but I definitely had a few where they just get startled, or they come up and you're not ready to come around a corner and there's one standing there, and or they get close to a customer that they didn't even know one was there. So yeah, they're a little bit of both, but for the most part, it's pretty cool to let them fish around you. and just kind of, intermingle with them while you're fishing, they're fishing. Pretty laid back.
I remember one time, it was the first time I went to Alaska. We went down to this, it was on the Kenai, but I believe it was close to where the Russian River dumps in, somewhere along the river. It might have even been on the Russian, but we got down there and I was like, no people in the parking lot, which was weird because the run was pretty strong. And there's these two old guys and they're walking up, and there was people on either stretches of the river, but like this particular landing, there was nobody there. And we thought, oh, great, we can get in here and fish. And there's these two old duffers, and he's like, yeah, I said, how come there's no one here? Is this closed down or what's the deal? He said, no, actually, there's a bunch of bears down here. He's like, it's their river right now. He's like, once they clear out, we're going to head down there and fish. And I kind of peeked my head over the side, and he had a sidearm, on the side. And we kind of peeked over the side. We're like, all right, we'll find somewhere else to fish. But it was really cool to see the bears kind of on that stretch of river there. Very neat. Obviously, one of my first Alaska experiences. I fished the streams in several different areas. I've never had like a close encounter with a bear whatsoever, other than seeing them from a distance like that. Sort of a dream of mine. I had my son up there a couple of years ago. We were actually fishing the sockeye run, and same thing. We were kind of leery of getting too far off the beaten path because I didn't want to bump into a bear situation. I had some bear spray, but I didn't have a firearm or anything like that. So just another day guiding in Alaska, dealing with grizzly bears.
Yeah, and the river we're on, we're remote. We're flying, an hour in 4-seat planes, and so you're really off the beaten path when you start. But these bears are in the open. There's lots of open, sand dunes, and you can see a long ways. If you get back up into the top of the river, it can get a little dicey. You got these little cuts and alder turns where they can sneak out, and so you really got to be careful in those areas. But when you're out in the open and they can see you and you can see them, honestly, we fish, and they'll fish right through you. They'll walk 20 yards right out in front, just kind of keep moseying on. There's a bunch of people down there. We're usually ready for them. They don't like the noise of the four-wheeler much, so if you get a pesky one, sometimes you just rev her up and they just move on. So, but
that's cool.
You get used to it. Like, it's kind of probably not a good thing, but over the 8 years or 7 years that I was up there, you just kind of get used to it, and it's really exciting, honestly, and I enjoyed that part.
So this year I've had probably the most FOMO just because I love catching the silvers. I like catching the sockeyes. This year was supposed to be like the biggest sockeye run on the Kenai that they've had in like 30 years. And so I've been seeing throughout the run here, I've been seeing reports of, the amount of sockeyes they're catching, the guides are catching them, the people on shore doing the combat fishing. I mean, everyone's catching the sockeye salmon. When I did it with my son a couple years ago, it was like the river runs through it. I mean, I literally we weren't even supposed to be fishing them that day, but we had gotten blown off. We were supposed to go out halibut fishing and gotten blown off. So we drove all the way back to the Kenai because we heard the run was pretty strong. And we get back there, and we got there super early in the morning because obviously we went to our charter and they canceled it for the day. But we pull up to the landing and all the guides are putting their boats in. And I saw this one guy like rigging up a rod. I'm like, hey, I don't want to bother you. I know you're busy guiding, but I'm just wanted to ask you, I'm like, is there any way you could point me in the right direction when it comes to where I should fish with my son? We were supposed to be obviously fishing, for halibut, got blown off. We literally just jumped in the truck quick because we wanted to fish. We don't want to waste a day in Alaska. Is there anywhere along this river we can fish and we can catch salmon, And the guide was super cool. He's like, listen, man, 450,000 sockeye hit the sonar this morning. He's like, you can pretty much go anywhere and catch them along this river. He's like, just pick a bend or somewhere, because we didn't want to do the combat fishing deal. We just kind of wanted to find our own. So we picked this bend. As I'm walking in, Mike, salmon are hitting my legs. They're like bumping my legs, and there's a mountain in the background. And I literally had this sense of, man, this is it. This is what I've been dreaming about. This is a bucket list thing. My son and I caught a whole bunch of sockeyes. We did the flop, the Kenai flop. We got that down pat. We had all the lures. We had such a great time. The thing is like, I didn't get to fish for very long. We literally fished them that day. Because we had a bunch of other fishing excursions we were doing. We fished kings out in the ocean. But I told my son, I'm like, we have to go back and experience that again. It's something that burns inside of me that I need to get back up there and do it. It was such a cool experience that, I want to do it again. And I've done the same thing with silvers, but same thing. I've like barely scratched that itch.
Yeah, I've probably scratched at it so much that it's, a problem where I almost feel like I have to have it. And it's been a couple years. Oh no, I just missed last year. The other morning I walked outside and it was raining and it was cold. It was like a cool rainy morning and I had the worst, just kind of nostalgic Alaskan feeling. And it was like just missing it. And I've been thinking about it a lot like you are lately. And yeah, I mean, the rush, especially, if you're throwing big flies for silvers and they're just crushing it as hard as you've ever had a hit before. And honestly, stripping as fast as you can. And they're still just, hitting that thing at high speeds off a fly rod. It's hard to beat. But I've been thinking about it a lot as well.
So the last few weeks, I should say this week, Robbie and I went up to Lake Superior, right? And we caught lake trout. But in the spring, we do a ton of coho fishing. I didn't bump into any cohos, but anytime I'm out there chasing cohos, and obviously they're a lot smaller than Alaskan cohos, but when we're chasing them, the aggressiveness of those fish, I can only imagine in the river what it looks like in person when you see these fish strike. Again, I've got buddies up in Alaska right now. My buddy Mike was just up there fishing a few different locations. They were doing a fly-in down by Juneau. They were fishing up by Homer, and just seeing the pictures on Facebook, I am so jealous right now.
I know. And I don't think that, it's really unique when they first start coming in the river. Like if you can get a stretch of silvers that are just like a day in or like hours in, they're the feistiest fish ever. Like they're faster, they're stronger, they're meaner. And that's what we're trying to time, like the river that we go to, which is called the Sayou. It's just a really remote place. So you don't have maybe 30 anglers on the whole thing a day. And when they come out of the ocean and they get a hold of your line, if you can catch them within the first quarter mile, it's the hardest fights I've ever had on a fly rod and probably any rod. Sometimes they'll just snap 20-pound fluoro right off your leaders.
Now, when we were there, people were throwing, like for silvers anyway, you could throw pixies, you could throw spinners. They were real aggressive. They'd hit a lot of different baits, whereas other salmon runs, it's a flossing deal. Like the sockeyes are basically coming up the river with their mouth open, just chomping. And so, you're catching them on a yarn rig or whatever. I know you guided for fly fishing, but as far as spinning gear, what are some of the baits that you guys would use?
The same stuff. Pixies are really popular up there, but, they're a heavier spoon, than like what we're used to throwing for like pike spoons and stuff. So, when that mostly heavy current up there with, like we talked about, rain a little bit ago, rain almost every day, especially through the good parts of the season. So pixies up to like 1.5 ounce, giant spoons, just so you can keep them moving in the water. And if you get a 6-foot pocket, if you don't have a heavy spoon, it's just going to float right over them. So you got to be able to kind of roll those slow. And then they use a lot of the Vibrex. It is that type of, kind of bladed, inline, spinners. I'm sure that a lot of them will work, but the Vibrex was really popular up there.
Sure.
Number 5s, number 6s, big ones. But yeah, like you said, they're an aggressive fish. They're not too picky. It's all about, maybe a color. It's something bright that day or, maybe just something flashy. And then just being able to get down to them because they're going to try to hit anything that comes in front of them on the right day.
What are some of your favorite moments of being up there? I mean, usually there's that aha moment where you have coffee in the morning or, something hits you like, man, I'm actually guiding in Alaska. Like you go from a kid, like you and I both were kids that loved to fish. And then we start guiding and our journeys go different directions. For me, I started guiding up in Canada and then worked my way back down to Mille Lacs where I grew up fishing on Lake Mille Lacs. Your journey was a little bit different. Is there a moment where you were in Alaska where you're just like, man, I can't believe it. Like, pinch me now. I'm guiding in Alaska.
Yeah. I've had those, we get these long rides in the morning. You get up camp is awesome. They take good care of you. They make whatever you want for breakfast. You get your people ready. You come out the door, and like for me, it doesn't matter on the weather. Like if you're going up there, you have all the gear. You're in your full waders. You're in full really good rain gear. So a lot of mornings you come out and you're driving this beautiful coast, and it might be 20-foot visibility, or you might be able to see the tallest peak in North America. Or but these long drives down this grassy kind of coastal beach, and I mean, getting goosebumps just telling you about it. It's just I take these drives, and every morning I think about it. I'm thinking about, man, where I'm at, what I'm doing, and it's how much I love it. And they're bittersweet. That's the time I think about my family a lot too, and I'm doing that. But excited to get back home and to see them, and just grateful for what I'm doing.
Yeah, right on. So you would basically go up there for the silver run. So you would start in August and go through early September?
Yeah. The longest stretch I did was like mid-August to mid-September. I did a couple of those seasons. And then after that, you get your foot in the door there, and they like to be able to get some of their, part-time guys up there that just love to be there, and they take good care of us. So like this year they offered me like a 14 or 15 day stretch. I just couldn't make it happen. I ended up tightening my schedule up too much here. And that has been the problem. I'm just getting way too busy to take time off, and in convincing my wife that I have to take less trips here, so I have to fly halfway across the country or more to do the same thing. So it goes back and forth on that, But she's come up there with me. This. My wife's a crazy fisherman as well, really good angler, great outdoorsman. So we've done a lot of that stuff together, and she's been up to camp with me as well.
Right on. I am a family man just like you. Obviously, my kids are a little bit older than yours, so I know what it's like sort of juggling family with fishing. It helps when your wife likes to fish. My wife loves to be on the water, and she gets my passion. She's not as passionate about fishing as I am, but she loves the experiences. Her and I and Robbie were just up on Lake Superior for a couple of days. She just loves being out there. She likes taking pictures of, the sights and seeing things from that perspective versus, let's say, like Split Rock Lighthouse or any of the sites up the North Shore. Being out in the boat and seeing it from the lake rather than way up on the cliffs looking down at Lake Superior, it's sort of a different perspective. So, we just pull up to some of these bigger, sharper break walls. I kind of look with my graph to make sure I wasn't going to hit a giant boulder, but it was literally dead flat calm. So we could get in there and kind of, just sort of drive around and look at look at rocks and look at the water and get up shallow so you could get a different perspective while you're fishing. We'd take breaks doing that, have lunch, and then go back out and catch lake trout. And she loved it, And so being with your family, doing experiences like that to me is like the ultimate fishing trip. And for both of us, we've done that a lot with our kids where, we might go up to Alaska fishing, and she's not as passionate about fishing, but she still wants to be out on the boat, be part of the experience, do some whale watching, catch some halibut, whatever it may be.
Yeah, we've done, the same. In my circumstance, my wife loves to be out there, so sometimes she gets a little jealous that I get to do it as much as I do. But she does love her job as well. But so we bring her along. I've gotten her she's come up and helped in camp. She's actually guided up in Alaska with us and taken groups out on her own up there. She's really knowledgeable about fly fishing. Taught me a lot about fly fishing, actually. She did it long before I did, and then all of a sudden I started guiding fly in Alaska. So she came up there. She does enjoy like the pictures and kind of documenting things better. So it's great because she's best of both worlds. And yeah, we took the kids to Juneau up there. It's a little less wild than the place that we were guiding, and did some whale watch and some halibut fishing. So I've had my kids up to Alaska as well. So
super cool. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Mike, I want to pick your brain a little bit more about Mille Lacs Lake. I know you love fishing in northern Minnesota, the Ely area. You and I have a passion for that area as well. So I want to talk, about fishing up there in northern Minnesota. Get your take on August fishing in Mille Lacs, and then cut you loose because we got a guide trip in about 15 minutes. So stay tuned. We got more dialed in angling after this. OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Quickly filter lakes by species, then select trophy potential, high abundance, keeper potential, or high stocking effort to find the fish you are after in the size and the numbers you are trying to catch. Download from the App Store today to get research tools for the serious anglers and beginners alike, giving you the data to target the right lakes and the confidence to get there. Use tools like recent imagery, fishing hotspot data, or the best-in-class weather features that call out current wind, weather, barometer, moon phase, majors and minors, along with precip and more. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you'd never known existed. Download onX Fish Midwest today, the app that is changing the game on ice and open water. All right, we're back with my guest, Mike Verdeja, Mike Verdeja's Guide Service. Mike, let's talk a little bit more about Mille Lacs fishing. I know as we get into August here, I know last year in August, things were a little tougher as far as the bite. This year, with all the bait in the lake, it looks like we're sort of heading that direction. But you know what? I'm still catching walleyes. I'm still catching some smallmouth bass. Despite all the headlines you see like on Facebook with all the dead fish on the north end, those are tulibies. It's a natural thing. Anytime it warms up like that, those bigger tulibies are going to die off. I think the lake is in a really healthy spot. I know being at the Mille Lacs Fisheries meeting, just talking with the DNR, everybody is optimistic on the walleye numbers, on the bass numbers, the pike numbers, the bait fish numbers. I'm really excited to see what the DNR is going to come up with when they start electroshocking in about a month to see what and doing their bait sampling to see what kind of bait that just hatched, because I'm guessing it's yellow perch. But I'm still seeing a ton of those smaller tulibies, which now they're getting a little bit bigger. And I'm also seeing the perch that we saw last winter that are in that 6, 7, 8-inch range. I think from top to bottom, this lake is extremely healthy as I've seen it for a very long time.
Yeah, you're seeing all species using, way more water. We were catching, consistently caught largemouth out in the open water the other day, away from shorelines, away from bays. So we're seeing, as you're catching things like that, I've caught pike, smallmouth, walleyes, largemouth, all on the same spots because it's healthy. There's food for them everywhere. Everything's kind of moving around. They're finding what they need. But when I get out into the middle of the lake, I am seeing a good variety of size. We've caught, like you said, the 6 to 8 inch perch, caught some, 12 and 13 inch perch. So we have all categories. The walleyes from, 9 and 10 inch, that smaller ones are kind of starting to, we're seeing them grow. We're not seeing as many little ones, but we have a great variety. You'll catch a 28 or a 27 on a spot, and you'll catch everything all the way down to a 15 on the same area. So really good variety of fish, lots of year classes, and just, like you said, as good as we've seen it in well over a decade.
What I'm shocked about is the amount of walleyes that are from 11 inches up to, let's say, 15, 16 inches. I've seen a ton of 16 inchers where is if you look on sort of the graphs from the DNR, that year class is supposed to be pretty much non-existent. Now, whether it's because they're just biting better, because there wasn't as much food source for a while or what, I'm seeing them all over the lake, which is a really good thing. And like you said, those 2024 walleyes that hatched, that were really small this winter. Of course, early spring, we were catching them like crazy. I'm not catching the numbers that I was this spring. I think there's been a lot more food for them, but I am seeing a ton of 9, 10, 11 inchers. And so they're pushing over the threshold. They're getting to the point where they're not a forage fish anymore. Now they can fend for themselves. There's sort of that length that these fish get to where, you don't have to worry about them getting eaten by other walleyes, by other predators other than muskies maybe and some big pike, but they're so random in the fishery right now that it doesn't even have an impact. But seeing those walleyes get over that 9, 10, 11 inch range, I think as we get into the winter, people are going to be amazed at the schools because, like you said, when you get out to some of these spots, you start looking with your graph and the amount of marks that you see, the amount that you see on 2D sonar, that you see on forward-facing sonar, all of that, I can't believe these schools. Some of these schools, I would say in the past, like if you showed me this school 10 years ago, I would have been like, those are all perch. No, they're not. They're walleyes. And it's amazing to see the numbers of those fish in this system.
Yeah, they're almost on every piece of mid-lake or even second-tier structure across the whole lake right now. If you drive around it, you'll find the school. And every piece of structure I've went to, you might not be able to get the walleyes you're looking for, so you keep moving because they're not there. But there's walleye on every piece of structure, and they're just everywhere. If you stop and you throw a smaller piece of bait out there, you're going to catch them on a float. So
yeah, there's spots where I had to move because there were so many 9 to 12-inch fish that they were attacking our bait, and I thought, man, I didn't bring enough bait to keep fishing this spot, because it's literally one after another. You don't have to go far. Like Mike said, every piece of structure. We're looking out onto the lake right now from the east side. I can look at 10 different rock humps that I know are absolutely loaded with these smaller fish right now. Super cool to see.
Yeah. It's been a great guiding season. Way better than last year. You're talking about maybe the lulls in the summer, a bite slowing down. We had a little lull around the 4th with the first really big hatch, but one thing I've been noticing is only the mayflies have really slowed them down for me. If we get a really big bug hatch, it's a mayfly hatch that slows them. The little fish flies and the midges and all the other smaller bugs aren't doing it. And it bounces back within 2 or 3 days. So you're always going to get those, little slowdowns from hatch, but we're still catching fish at a pretty crazy rate. I'm calling it way better than last year for me personally. So,
well, it's cool because, like where I've been fishing, it seems like, again, I'm fishing primarily rocks, deeper gravel, but even really not even that deep of gravel. I mean, just deeper rocks in general. And I'm catching smallmouth, I'm catching walleyes, I'm catching everything mixed in. So it's just a good fish catching event. You're catching the smaller fish, you're catching the bigger walleyes, you get the smallmouth mixed in. It makes for a great day. And I'm with you. I don't know if it's the amount of milfoil that's on this lake right now, but there are certain areas where I'm catching largemouth bass where I've never seen them before on Mille Lacs Lake. But the interesting part about that is I was just up on Leech doing the same thing. I pulled into a weed bed. I'm like, wow, look at all the fish sitting there. We threw at them with my customers, throwing bobbers at them. We threw in there. It was largemouth after largemouth. That's something and obviously Leech has always had largemouth, probably a lot more than Mille Lacs Lake, but I'm seeing that same trend along those milfoil lines. And to me, it's just my theory, but I'm guessing with the milfoil, you're seeing more largemouth just because the habitat is there.
For sure. And a lot of them right now, like the ones I've been seeing, there is a lot in the 1 to 2 pound range. They're not huge yet. If you get in the reeds and the shorelines, you get those really, really large ones. But in a few years, we might have a pretty darn good largemouth bass population.
Well, that's what's fun about Mille Lacs is you come out here, you just simply catch fish. Like Mike said, having a good guide trip with a tug on the line. Oh, and by the way, you can harvest a few this year. That's helped a lot for just guiding, but the resorts, I mean, look around right now, you see out-of-state plates all over, boats hooked up. Business has been pretty good around Mille Lacs Lake, and it's good to see. This is something that I've wanted to see for a very long time, ever since started having some disruptions or whatever. But the fact that we're at a 3-fish limit, the lake is really healthy from top to bottom. We've got great year classes of walleyes. We got great year classes of perch, great year classes of smallmouth. It's really good to see. Hey, Mike, I want to pick your brain a little bit. I know you spend a ton of time in northern Minnesota, up in Ely, Pelican, or all of those areas. I know you've got some trips planned. You've already been up there. You've got family up there. Katie has family up there. You spend a ton of time. It's an area of Minnesota that I absolutely love. I think, between the boundary waters, let's say Vermilion, and all the other lakes in Minnesota, I think that area gets overlooked. I really do. I think it sort of has that Canadian Shield look, but it's not as busy as a lot of other locations. What can you tell us about the trips that you've done already this summer and what plans you have for the future or in the near future of getting up there doing some fishing?
So the last couple of years, I stay packed at home here, May all the way through June. And the one really first trip of the year I look forward to is we get to Pelican Lake. We have family up there. They own a resort up there. love that lake. We go out there. I take my kids out there, and they're young right now. They're 8 and 9. So we do a lot of, trying to dial in deep weed lines. Pelican's a really weedy lake, but a great mixture of fish. It's another one where you can sit down, leech and bob or leech and crawler. I sit still a lot because my kids aren't quite ready to dial in, pulling the rigs or spinners. And so we do a lot of float fishing on deep weed lines. You're just in a lake like that, there's so much structure and there's miles of weed mat. So you kind of have to decipher the difference of what type of weeds are going to hold them and then just a big junk weed mat, and so we look around for those areas. They generally have some rock in them still, and if you find those, you'll catch big bass, largemouth, smallmouth, a great selection of northerns. And then there's some really good walleye fishing in that lake too, but you might catch a 1 pound sunfish. You catch a keeper walleye, you get a northern, and you could rotate through that, and you never know what's coming up on the end of the line in a lake like that.
One of my best buddies, Pete, his son PJ actually got a 31.5-inch walleye on that lake. And yeah, like you said, when you get up there, it sort of seems overwhelming because there's so much vegetation. Not only is there a weed line, but the vegetation, and there's like these giant flats. And so deciphering the edges that are good. I know I found some humps where you find the right cabbage, where it's like not that thick weed wall, where it holds walleyes. Like you said, giant schools of panfish. I've heard this year that the crappie bite has been really good. Obviously, that lake's really known for bass, for pike. I know Pete's dad and his family. I mean, the reason they had their camper there is because they love catching pike. They love catching big jacks, and so they were always like chasing the pike. I came up there because I wanted to find the walleyes, right? And so when I came up and fished Pelican Lake and Ore for the first time, probably 10, 15 years ago, I was in love with that lake just because of the overwhelming amount of structure, but then how good of a walleye lake it actually was.
Yeah, it's definitely overlooked in the walleye department because it's such a well-known bass destination. It is great for that, but lots of places for walleyes to hide. And midsummer doesn't matter. It's kind of a green, warmer, shallow lake. The walleyes are still kind of mostly hanging out in that 12 to 14 feet, but the weed lines are extending well into that. And so you're just trying to dial those into better structure. And like you said, 30-plus-inch fish running around there, a lot of big ones. And the good thing is, most people nowadays are throwing those big dogs back. So, we're always on the hunt for a 30 in that lake.
Yeah, that's cool. And there's a ton of sleeper lakes around that lake where, you can get out there, and if it's windy or whatever reason you don't want to fish pelican, there's a million other lakes around there that are good.
Yeah, Pelican's, it's a top 25 size lake in the state. I think it's 11,000 acres. If you get a nasty west wind coming across that and you're launching on the east side, yeah, you can pop up and hit elephant and myrtle and black duck and ash. There's a number of lakes. They all hold really nice panfish. They all hold nice bass and walleyes.
We got a guide trip coming up here in about 5 minutes. Just real quickly, what trips do you have on the books here that you're looking forward to getting out fishing? I know August is here. Kids are going back to school by September. What sort of family trips are you getting or that you're trying to fit in here before everything turns to fall?
We take a week vacation and we go tent camping now. I grew up doing that. We've had campers, we have places we like to go. We love doing VRBOs. A couple years ago, I said, let's do what we did when we were kids. So I went and bought a bunch of camping gear. And the last week of August, before the kids go back to school, we're going to the Gunflint Trail. We're going to go up there.
Nice.
We're going to bring the boat. I don't get crazy. I'm not doing any pack-ins. I still like my boat. So we go up to the end of the Gunflint. We're going to stay in Gunflint Pines, a little campground, hit some small lakes up there. We'll do some lake trout fishing on Gunflint Lake. So that's one that I really look forward to. Set up shop on Gunflint for the week. And then the last hurrah family trip of the year, we go back to Pelican for an MEA October trip, and we absolutely slaughter them every year. What we're going to catch? We catch big everything, but we're creek chub fishing for giant walleyes. It's amazing.
Mikey, that's why you and I are buds, because Mike and I fish every single day guiding, but when we get a day off, we want to go fishing somewhere. And I know it sounds weird to people. A lot of people just would cringe at that and say, if you get a day off the water, they want to go do something else. Not me. I know like Like I count down the days until my next trip that I can take with my kids, whether it's Robbie and I going somewhere, it could be Robbie and I and Hannah and Sonia. But like I look forward to fishing and different fishing experiences away from guiding. And so best of luck to you. I love the Gunflint Trail. I love that area. I actually did a podcast up there. Back last fall, drove up the Gunflint. I forget how cool it is. Just sort of going to the end of the earth. It feels like when you get to the end of the Gunflint, how special a place it actually is. This year, obviously, with the wildfires and stuff in northern Minnesota and the Boundary Waters, you worry about that sort of place. And I know a lot of natural fires are good for the forest, so it's not all bad. But even so, I know there's a lot of people that have their annual trips either up the Gunflint or in the Boundary Waters that didn't get to do that this year. So I'm pumped for you. Hopefully you have an awesome time up there. I know spending so many days guiding, you count down those days. And what I like about your trip with your family is you're doing it old school, where you're actually camping in tents and doing it like we did. Because I was sort of the same way. I loved camping as a kid, but my dad loved fishing more than camping. And so he bought a camper, and anytime we went camping, we stayed in the camper, and fishing was the sort of the focus. I love the fact that you're mixing in the camping, because that's great for kids. I think kids need that experience of just going camping. This fall, or last fall, actually, one quick story before we cut loose. Robbie and I went camping, deer hunting. We went over to Wisconsin. Everything's booked. We kind of did a DIY deer hunting trip. We wanted to hunt public land, area that I had hunted years ago, like when I was back in college. I just remember how cool of an area it was. So Robbie and I literally grabbed the insulated otter, right? The hub that you'd use in the winter. We popped it up. We got the cook stove out, the griddle. We had all of our camping supplies, all of our deer hunting stuff. One of the best memories I have of deer hunting, and we never even shot a deer. We had opportunities at deer. We could have harvested deer. We opted not to, but wasn't about the deer hunting. It was more about that camping trip than anything. So super cool that you're going to experience that with your kids.
Yeah, I'm glad we turned it into a tradition, and I'm sure we're going to keep doing that until the kids will keep going with us.
Right on, Mike. Hey, thank you so much for being on the podcast, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
If people want to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
Well, I have I'm MV Mille Lacs Guide Service on Instagram. I have my Facebook page, my Mike Verdeja's Guide Service Facebook, my personal. You can message me there, or just Mike Verdeja's Guide Service website. So
cool, man. Love having you on. Love to have you on again. I know we've had you on for fishing reports. We've talked to you in the winter. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again. Thanks for taking the time to be on the Dialed In Angling podcast. Hey, that wraps it up for me this week. Mike and I are going to hit Mille Lacs Lake. It looks like the wind's going down, so that's a good thing. The bite is good. Even though we're in August, it's not the doldrums. This is a great time of year to get out and get after it before your kids go back to school. So good luck to everybody out there. As always, I'm Tony Roach. This has been the Dialed In Angling podcast.